OMG. On October 2nd, 1918, Major Whittlesey led the 72nd Battalion, which was his first battalion, into the Argonne Forest. When they thought that they were with many people, they realized they were actually very much alone. The points I'm going to make in this video are about how grave Major Whittlesey's efforts were and how good of a job he did during this entire battle, why this battle is important, and why this battle changed a lot of things within the war and outside of it. The 77th Battalion is often referred to as the Lost Battalion, and according to the United States World War I Centennial Commission, it states on their website that over 600 men went into this battle and only 194 came out of it by the end. Mind you, they were lost in the Argonne Forest for 7 days. They were not found until October 8th. Major Whittlesey went in there with over 600 men and came out with very little. Now, let me tell you how that happened. The French were supposed to cover our flanks, and when Major Whittlesey got his entire battalion into the Argonne Forest, he quickly found out that the French were nowhere to be found, nor were they going to be found. They also realized that they were completely surrounded by the German front lines. They realized that they were the first to get there, and that nobody had been able to make it past besides them somehow. Well, during this, the German soldiers used different methods to be able to harm and kill the American troops that were in the forest, including using very large blowtorches and using different forms of torture, including taking some of the men and sending them back. But the men that they sent back with messages. They kept telling Major Whittlesey to surrender, that he was never going to make it out. His people were never going to make it out. They knew that they were starving because they were. They were having to take food off of the bodies around them, the other German soldiers, and they were also having to take ammunition off of them to be able to get any form of ammunition or food because they had ran out of food completely. And Major Whittlesey refused to send a white flag back to the Germans, even though they said that they would let them make it out completely alive and okay. Major Whittlesey sent back a carrier pigeon at some point during this battle because of the fact that the Americans unfortunately started bombing our own men because we didn't know where the 77th Battalion had ended up, and nor did we know if they were alive, especially because so many people did not come back. And it was not very easy to track people at this time, especially because it's World War I. Well, Major Whittlesey sent a carrier pigeon, and that carrier pigeon was actually shot in the leg by the German soldiers, but was still able to make it back to the US. And they immediately stopped bombing and sent out a plane to see where the 77th Battalion was. Well, the Germans did shoot down that plane, but when they shot it down, we found out where our men were. When that happened, we sent troops to be able to rescue them because they were completely stuck in this forest by themselves for 7 days of a battle that was only supposed to last them less than that. They were never intended to go in there like that, to the point where they were severely underarmed and completely, basically, they might as well have gone in there unarmed because of the lack of materials and supplies that they had. Well, eventually they were able to get there. And when our other soldiers got there, the colonel ended up telling Major Whittlesey that all of his men would be promoted for their efforts. And he also said that it was acceptable losses. There has been this question of acceptable losses that has been brought into play with this battle a lot, especially because of how many men died. Now, Major Whittlesey was very upset by this, and he ended up leaving very shortly after that. He left the military. It was about 2 years after the war ended, so I guess he served out the rest of his term. And Major Whittlesey did tell the colonel that, with no disrespect, there was no such thing as an acceptable loss because of the amount of men that they lost. Those men were promoted, the ones that came out of that forest, but unfortunately they also came out of that forest completely different and not the same people. And this colonel is a bit why we had to consider what were acceptable losses and weren't, and that our military should be held accountable if a person makes a very wrong call. However, we did win the war very shortly after this, and we were able to push past, and World War I was won by the Allies.